Okay, happy Thursday, everyone. My name is Dave Bullard, and I'd like to welcome you to a discussion of three exciting electricity transmission projects in the U.S. By way of introduction, I'm a Senior Director of Product and Industry Strategy with Oracle Construction and Engineering. I'm based in St. Louis. My background includes about 10 years at Anheuser-Busch. Yes, I'm a hometown beer guy. And 10 years looking after project control for Ameren, Missouri non-nuclear generation. In my current role, I get to spend a lot of time with energy sector thought leaders talking about how we plan, build, and operate critical infrastructure. Now, today, as we're all keenly aware, there's a huge focus on delivering more carbon neutral energy. Electricity is a big component of that, whether for residential loads, industrial loads, or electrification of transportation. So when the source of that renewable, cleaner energy differs from where it's needed, new transmission infrastructure is required. The three leaders joining me today are going to share how they're working to connect clean energy generation with its demand. So I'd like to take a quick second here and introduce each of our panelists. First, we have Choquette. Kara is the Director of Communications and Government Relations for TransWest Express. She's been part of the TransWest Express project development teams for over 12 years. She previously worked in the water and wastewater industry for CH2M Hill and was a newspaper business reporter. Now, Kara is uniquely connected to so many people today. Her ancestors came to the U.S. from Quebec in the 1880s, and she's connected to me because she's a University of Mizzou grad. She got her master's degree in journalism there. Next, we have Zohrab Mawani. Apologize. Zohrab is the president of oneGrid Corporation and Lake Erie Power Corp. He's an entrepreneur and executive in the energy sector. He started with government and utilities in 1995 and then moved over to renewable energy development in 2002. Having participated in the decarbonization of the electricity sector in North America and Africa, he's more recently turned his attention to decarbonization of the buildings and transportation sectors. And last but not least, we have Steve Frenkel. Steve is a VP at Direct Connect Development Company, the developer of the Sioux Green HVDC link transmission line we're going to hear about today. Steve has more than 20 years of energy policy, finance, and business development experience, including technology and business model innovation. Steve previously directed Midwest operations for the clean energy financing firm Renew Financial and served as a chief policy advisor at the Illinois EPA and as deputy chief of staff in the Illinois governor's office. So welcome, folks. Let's don't waste any time. Let's get into some project overviews. Kara, I'd like to start with you and hear about the TransWest Express.
Sure. Thank you so much for the gracious introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to participate in this event. I have just a few slides to show here. I'm going to hopefully open that up right now. Can you see that okay, everyone? Good. So I think it's really hard to talk about linear infrastructure like transmission without providing some maps. So I just have two slides to share with the group today. And again, hopefully, with a thumbs up, everyone can see it okay. And really kind of, first of all, setting out what is the purpose and need of the TransWest Express transmission project. So this is a map we've put together that shows the existing wind resources in the Western U.S. power grid. So we're all connected in the West through the Western Electricity Coordinating Council into Canada and Mexico as well. But this is showing the states. And the gray bars indicate the relative width of the existing transmission capacity that exists in the West. So you can see along the West Coast, there's a great amount of existing transmission capacity to help exchange hydropower, for example, north and south through the grid. But there is not a lot of transmission that connects then what are really the best onshore wind resources in in the United States, and certainly in the Western interconnection that goes east to west. So that is the purpose of the TransWest project, and I'll flip to the next slide here, is to really create that stronger connectivity across the West, and specifically to help provide access to that great wind energy resource available in Wyoming. So this map shows, again, that existing transmission capacity, but then with the overlay of the TransWest Express transmission project. So the idea would be to create 732 miles of high voltage interregional transmission capacity. The project would start in south central Wyoming, in Carbon County, Wyoming, which actually has the best wind energy resources in the country, and then be an HVDC line over 400 miles to connect to the Intermountain Power System near Delta, Utah. And that's always been part of the purpose and need of the TransWest project when we started this back in, well, we started as TransWest in 2008, taking over the project, but to maintain the flexibility to connect at the Intermountain Power System because there's an existing HVDC line that goes from the Intermountain Power Plant down into Adelanto, California. So the idea would be to have HVDC from Wyoming to the Intermountain Power Station, connect there into the grid, and then have the second part of TransWest be a 1,500 megawatt high voltage alternating current transmission system that would effectively complement the existing Southern transmission system that goes from the Intermountain Power down into California. So our project, again, you can see with the gray at the bottom, there's so much existing transmission capacity. So the idea would be to connect into Southern Nevada, either at the Crystal and or near Hoover Dam, essentially in the El Dorado Valley. The TransWest project, as I briefly indicated, has really been underway really since the early 2000s. There was an effort by the Rocky Mountain Regional Transmission Study with the governors to look at how do we better connect the rich renewable resources that are available in the Intermountain region, but there's just not the demand or the load to use those resources with the Desert Southwest and the areas that need the power. TransWest Express took over the project in 2008, as I said, and have been moving it forward through the permitting process ever since. So long story, much later, after 12 years, we are very pleased that we have the federal rights of way for the project across the majority of the route is on federal land, as well as the necessary state permits and the county permits. So the TransWest project, after the whole environmental analysis sorted out, covers or crosses 14 counties, and all of those counties required a conditional use permit or equivalent authorization along the route. So we have that key federal, state, and county permitting complete. And you may be aware that the staff of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission looked at the importance, and it's really exciting, as Dave highlighted here, to see how transmission has really been kind of at the forefront of a lot of clean energy discussions. And looking at projects that would help meet those clean energy needs. And the TransWest project was the only one specifically called out in that FERC report about how it can help states like California, Arizona, and Nevada achieve their renewable energy goals with diverse supplies of renewable energy. And that's a really key part of the whole conversation is how do we better connect the solar resources in the Desert Southwest with the wind resources of the Intermountain region and have that diversity that's needed to create a not only a cleaner grid, but more resilient, more reliable grid as well. So really matching those diverse resources across the West. So that's kind of my overall summary remarks. Again, as we go forward, happy to take questions, but I think I'll turn it back over to you, Dave.
Thank you very much, Kara. Now, staying on that renewable energy goal theme, Zohrab, can you share with us what I think you like to call a tale of two grids?
Sure. Thank you, Dave. Thanks for the introduction. Yes, so we're developing an HVDC transmission project in New York State. My company is oneGrid, and the plan is to deliver clean air to New York City. When we initially started the project in 2015, the intention was to help to solve some of the congestion issues in the NYISO grid. And as we've continued to develop the project over the last several years, it's becoming more and more of a story of delivering renewable resources from upstate New York to New York City. And so we call this the Empire State Connector. It's a high voltage DC transmission line up to 1,250 megawatts. And we're expecting an in-service date of 2026, early 2026. We have multiple customers we're speaking to in downstate New York. There's a lot of interest, partly because of some of the policy at the city level and at the state level. But there are other customers that are interested because they want to receive physically delivered renewable energy to their regions. We've gone through much of the NYISO interconnection process. We've completed the SRIS, and we're ready to start the class year process in New York State. Now, strategically, why do you need physical delivery to New York City? As Dave mentioned, Tale of Two Grids. This image here shows a graphic that is put out in the annual report by the NISO, and it shows the real dichotomy in the grid between upstate New York and downstate. On the top left here, you see the greenness of upstate New York, which is about 90% emissions free. And then downstate, New York City, Long Island, and Westchester County, you see that the grid is about 70% emissions or 30% emissions free. And that component that's emissions free is largely due to Indian Point Nuclear, which is just shutting down now. So you'll see that that fossil component will be coming up just to keep the lights on in downstate. So there's a real need to get past these yellow zones of congestion and to deliver to downstate New York. And essentially, that's why we conceived of the project. And so it will allow us to deliver upstate renewable resources past these congestion zones and get to downstate New York. And it's a real need now that we've got Indian Point coming offline, but we've also got thermal plants and peakers coming offline downstate as well. And so in terms of the timeline, we're targeting completion of development by end of 2022 so that we can start construction in early 2023. This will allow us to complete construction by end of 2025 and be in service in early 2026. That's at a high level. Just to touch on some of the milestones here. So we have our real estate secured in upstate New York at Marcy, adjacent to the Marcy substation, which is the NYPA's Clark Energy Control Center. We've got 90 acres there. We've had that secured for a number of years. We've also got a site that in Brooklyn that is going to host our converter station there. That is about half a mile from the substation. And then in terms of the right-of-way, which is a real challenge for these kinds of projects, you know, it's 250 miles or 400 kilometers. Right-of-ways are typically a real challenge for these projects. There's typically public opposition, there's environmental considerations, there's interruption of farmland or private lands. It can be a real hornet's nest if you're dealing with a lot of landowners. So after some years of looking at optimized routing, we've just completed a transaction earlier this year with a railroad owner that has railroad for most of the portion of our route. So essentially it gives us 93% of our right-of-way from upstate to downstate. And so that remaining 7%, or about 18 miles or 17 miles, I guess, is existing county roads and some transit in the Hudson River. So those are a matter of process. It's not we don't see those as high risk elements. We see them just as a matter of process. So having that 93% of our right-of-way secured is really important and strategic part of our project development. It allows us to continue with all the other elements and complete our project on time. So we're conducting our engineering and finalizing that routing, and we will be submitting our Article 7 end of this year so that we can complete the permitting on time in 2022. I think that's the overview that I wanted to share with you today, just to give you a bit of our track record here. We've got the Lake Erie Connector also crossing Lake Erie from Ontario, Canada to PJM market in Erie, Pennsylvania. And we were also the original developers of the Champlain Hudson Power Express, which is now owned by Blackstone. Thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity.
Oh, excellent. Thank you, Zohrab. Now, I heard you mentioned railway. Seems like a natural segue to our final panelist here. Steve Frenkel, could you talk to us about the Sioux Green Renewable Rail project?
Sure. Thanks, Dave. And like Zohrab's project, we're also a underground rail co-located project. So we are underground along existing right-of-way on private railroad land all the way from northwest Iowa to just outside of Chicago. We're called the Sioux Green HVDC link. We're going to deliver 2,100 megawatts of affordable, low-cost renewable energy from the upper MISO region in the Midwest to the PJM region that terminates in Chicago on the western edge. Like Zohrab was talking about, if you go underground along a rail, you can solve the three key problems, or at least two of the three key problems that plague these kinds of projects: siting and permitting, and then cost. And so Sugreen solved all three of these problems. By partnering with Canadian Pacific, we're going to be along the rail for most of the project. So we know our route from point A to point B from day one. There have been projects along similar paths that are overhead that have tried to connect these two markets, the MISO and PJM markets previously, that had over 1,500 landowners opposing them in the state of Iowa. We have 6 landowners opposing us. So it's virtually no landowner opposition, which proves the model that if you can use an existing right-of-way, and railroads are really the ideal right-of-way to use, that you can avoid the landowner opposition that blocks these projects and have caused them to fail in the past. And we avoid all the environmental impacts that have troubled these projects in the past as well by being in an existing disturbed corridor, and then we can use directional drilling to go under sensitive habitats. And the third area, in addition to siting and permitting that has plagued interregional transmission, has been who pays for it. Sugreen is a 100% privately financed project, so there's no ratepayer subsidies involved, so there's not a need to determine who's going to pay across a large territory of multiple states, and that can take years and maybe never gets resolved. And so if we want to go fast and we want to decarbonize the grid, we need to do projects like Sugreen and like the Empire State Connector that use existing railroad corridors. For those of you who paid attention to the American Jobs Plan, President Biden's infrastructure initiative that was announced last month, you really couldn't have written a transmission section that was closer to what Sugreen is. The president called for deploying private capital to deliver low-cost renewable energy to market using existing transportation corridors like railroads to unlock private capital and create union jobs. And that is Sugreen. So if we're going to build a national clean energy grid, this is a replicable model. We're talking to all the major railroads in the United States about how to build projects like Sugreen all across the United States to deliver affordable renewable energy to market and decarbonize our grid and create good jobs and put people back to work. So let me stop there and we can get into a discussion.
Oh, excellent, Steve. And Steve, you waited patiently to present your project. I'd like to put the first project to you. I mean, first question to you, and then open it up to the group. You mentioned the American Jobs Plan. Let's talk about state and municipal level policy. Does current policy at the state or municipal level affect or support your project and its successful development?
Fortunately, because we are on a private right-of-way owned by the railroad, that minimizes the jurisdictional oversight, I suppose, meaning that we do have to obtain certain use permits from, in the state of Iowa, from counties and municipalities, and we do need a franchise agreement from the Iowa Utilities Board. But that is a far smoother process than if we were to be using eminent domain to impose a project like this on private land and disturbing farmland and going overhead. So it makes things much, much easier, minimizes the jurisdictional issues and the regulatory compliance matters. Now, we do have, obviously, federal permits related to Army Corps and EPA and others. And I have to tell you that the regulators love projects like Sugreen because we not only do we minimize the environmental impacts, we avoid them, and there are no visual impacts because we're underground in the right-of-way. So I would say that our experience and process with state and local and county governments has been extremely smooth and very positive. Excellent.
Zohrab, any comments?
Thank you. I'd echo Steve's sentiments, and I think having the line buried in the railroad right-of-way shows that you're using existing infrastructure. It's out of sight, out of mind. There's no visual impact, and so there's less likelihood of public opposition, and that's a key component for us. To touch on policy at the state and city level, for us in New York, it's a bit of a unique situation because we have the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which is the clean energy standard in New York, and so we definitely help the state achieve their goals for renewable energy in the state. But more interesting at the municipal level in New York City, they've established what's called Local Law 97, or the Climate Mobilization Act. And this requires building owners to basically basically to reveal their emissions and disclose their emissions. That's the word I was looking for. So they have to disclose their emissions, but they also have to reduce their emissions over time. And so one of the ways that they can reduce their emissions is by procuring renewable energy instead of the thermal energy that's available in New York City today. So that's creates a real opportunity for us to deliver that, physically deliver that renewable energy to them and allow them to meet their requirements, not just to be compliant, but there's also penalties if you're not compliant. So this is also an extra financial opportunity for them to avoid those penalties.
Excellent. Thank you, Zohrab. Kara?
Yeah, I guess it's interesting. I was thinking of the question, I think more maybe along the lines that you were, Zohrab, about markets and opportunity. And certainly one of the big drivers for a project like the TransWest Express transmission project is renewable portfolio standards. So the states of California, Arizona, Nevada have all said they want to have a certain percentage of renewable energy delivered to their customers by certain timeframes. And those renewable portfolio standards have only gotten stronger and bigger over the years, and really, again, underscore the need for a project like TransWest that can connect those areas to cost-effective, highly reliable, diverse supplies of renewable energy in Wyoming. So from a market perspective, I think the states and the cities that also have, say 100% renewable goals or the like are certainly drivers for these kind of projects. I guess on the permitting side as well, in the West, it's a very different environment than I think what you guys deal with in the East. I don't think that the BLM, for example, allows projects to be in an existing right-of-way without further environmental analysis. So it's not quite as simple in that sense when you're involved on federal lands. But that said, our project does look to align with existing infrastructure as much as possible and follow those roads, pipelines, other existing infrastructure as much as possible to keep that together in the West. And I think that is an advantage in some respects to be on federal land, is that long environmental analysis process, though, actually provides great opportunities for public feedback and involvement. So we've had 732 miles of line of no organized opposition along the route, and again are down to just a handful of private land miles to acquire via easements. So we're really proud of that progress that we've had, and the environmental analysis process, I think, was helpful in that regard in giving the states, the counties, municipalities, landowners all a voice in the process of where the project would be sited. All
right. Now, I'd like to build on something I just heard. We kicked off by talking about cleaner, greener energy, and we've heard from Steve and Zohrab about the importance of leveraging existing infrastructure. I want to talk about other considerations as we think about developing new projects. Is there a theme to how development of new projects should be taken now as compared to how they were in the past? And Steve, I'd like to go back to you to start us off.
Sure. I mean, I think if we want to deliver clean energy to market and do it quickly, you've got to use existing rights of way. It just cuts the entire process time and development time frame by 50% at least. And so if you want to go fast, you've got to use this kind of model. So that's why I think we're getting so much interest from the White House, from Congress with an investment tax credit for transmission, with a lot of excitement about the underground rail co-location model. And so I think that's the only way we're going to do this quickly. If we rely on traditional methods, it takes 10 years or more to build a project, and then you may never get it done because you've got landowner opposition. We've seen many projects fail for that reason. And so staying in a railroad corridor that's a already disturbed brownfield, that's underground, out of sight, out of mind, it's climate resilient, it adds reliability, it's safe from extreme weather. It really solves so many problems and allows you to go fast, and it's cost effective. It's on cost parity with going overhead if you take into account the capacity of the line. So people often think that going underground is 10 times more expensive. It's not. If you look at the megawatts per mile that are transmitted and use that measure of cost effectiveness and efficiency of the line, going underground is at cost parity with traditional overhead.
Zohrab, your thoughts? Anything along the lines of social or equity considerations on your mind?
Definitely, there are a lot of considerations here. I'd start with environmental justice in New York City. I mean, all over the country, this is a big consideration, but in New York City, it's at another level. I'd say I really learned more about environmental justice in New York City over the last several years than I've ever known. So it's been a very interesting discussion. And what we really like about our project is that we're delivering renewable resources into the heart of the city, and it allows the offset of the use of these thermal plants that are in these low-income neighborhoods and creating polluted air in those neighborhoods. And the impact to air quality in those neighborhoods from these peakers running for decades has really been seen. And there's a lot of related issues around that. And so we're able to help right that wrong, I think. And so from an environmental justice perspective, our project, we feel that we can really help the cause in New York City. I think from an environmental perspective, using an existing right-of-way allows us to sort of mitigate or minimize any environmental impact by creating a new right-of-way or by interrupting private or farmland or other lands. Many projects in New York State have seen public opposition or government agency opposition due to the fact that they're going through state park or through some lands that they are going to create a significant impact to. So by using an existing right of way, we avoid all of that. We're going on already developed land, and we're going to be buried underground. So it's a real win-win. And I think those are just a couple of the issues, but many more. If we had more time, I'd like to get into some more of them.
Thank you, Zohrab. Kara, to you.
I would just add on those good points. I think the people component is really important to engage the local communities, perhaps in a way that wasn't done in the first generation of big transmission lines, say 40 years ago. But having those ongoing conversations and talking with people, giving them a voice in the process and a way to participate in the process, I think helps bring people along the way, and really to educate people about why we need, in some cases we don't need transmission lines, in other places we do. And so I think every project has its unique business case and purpose and need, and really taking the time to help people understand, like in the West, there hasn't been big interregional transmission systems built since the 70s. And so the communities haven't seen this kind of infrastructure be built. I think when we were doing public outreach, say in Western Utah, it was very easy to say, we'd point to the existing Southern transmission system and say, hey, we're going to build another thing like that right next to that. And people are like, oh, okay. So having something to gravitate to and understand. So, taking the time to engage with and work with local landowners, communities, stakeholders along the way, I think is probably more important than ever, and only continue to grow in importance going forward.
Absolutely, Kara. Well, Kara and Zohrab, as you always hear, time flies when you're having fun. We're down to our last couple of minutes. Before we wrap, though, could each of you take 1 minute and just share with me, because project delivery is my thing. I get passionate about it. What do you see as the biggest risk to successful project delivery, and what are you doing to mitigate that? Zohrab, you want to start us off?
Sure. Okay. Thanks, Dave. So I'd say this is something that we don't often talk about as developers. We don't talk publicly about this, but one of the biggest risks for us is financing of the project. These are big projects, capex in the billions of dollars, and we're a small team, a small company that has big ideas but not very deep pockets, and so we need to align ourselves as we develop the project with the right financial partner. And so we've been successful in the past on our projects with aligning with the likes of Blackstone, with ITC Holdings, now part of Fortis. So large partners like that. We've also got ATC on our team at oneGrid. They're a shareholder as well. So we've had the pleasure of working with these strong partners. So as we continue development of the Empire State Connector, we need to make sure that we're aligned with the right financial partner that can have the patience to get through the tough stuff in development and get us there, and have the financial support, but not only the financial support, also the technical and other support that's needed from a larger team. So we are in discussions with some potential partners now, and I'm sure we'll find the right partner. But that's a big risk, finding the partner that's willing to invest hundreds of millions of dollars of equity, and also billions of dollars of debt for a successful completion of the project.
Understood. Thanks, Zohrab. Kara, you want to bring us home?
Sure. Well, I'll try. I mean, I think, we think about risk in kind of those three big buckets of permitting risk, market and commercial risk, and then certainly the schedule. And so our whole approach all along is how do we mitigate and minimize those risks along the way? Permitting is just being very thorough, diligent, getting through the process along the way. Again, it's a really different game when you're involved with federal lands in the West. The market risk, as I mentioned, is really, it's decreased over time because those renewable portfolio standards have only grown and increased and provided more demand for energy like what TransWest could provide. And then, the schedule risk, again, we're a little unusual in that, we're working to complete the permitting first and then enter into commercial arrangements. So we can be very certain and very sure to say we can deliver this power in this time frame, even with the uncertainties associated with the federal environmental analysis process. So, I think no matter what renewable energy project you're going to face those factors, as Zohrab mentioned too, that the commercial aspect as well. But for us, it was really permitting and schedule that were the big risks that we've worked really hard to minimize and mitigate along the way.
All right, thanks. Thank you, Kara. So Kara, Zohrab, thank you very much for your time today. I know Steve had to jump off early, and I want to thank all the attendees for listening in. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.